first speaker. Ruby.
Good morning. How's everyone doing today? Awesome. So it's an honor to introduce our first guest speaker, Senator Bowie. Upon his arrival to Arizona in 1994, Sean Bowie has dedicated his life to providing the best and sensible public policy for Arizona. After graduating from Arizona State University with a dual degree in political science and history, Sean fought for the best policy on all levels of government. He has been able to work on various projects in education, healthcare, and social security. His drive and stamina has helped make the government more effective and responsible for the benefit of all citizens. Please help me give him a warm welcome.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for having the three of us. We are in the middle of legislative session, so we all look a little tired and a little razzled. I know the House was there until 9 o'clock last night, 8:30. We got out about 4 o'clock, because in the Senate we don't talk nearly as much. We just have to work and get our stuff done. The House takes a little longer. So for those of you who haven't met, my name is Sean Bowie. I serve in the Arizona State Senate. I represent, along with Representatives Tremaine and Epstein, District 18, which the Chandler portion is West Chandler, so it's everything west of Dobson, north of Pecos. So we have Chandler Fashion Center, Intel, and a lot of the companies over there by Dobson. This is my 4th year in the Senate. I was first elected in 2016, re-elected in 2018, and because unlike the mayor and the council, we don't get these fancy 4-year terms, we get 2-year terms. So we'll be on the ballot again in 2020. In 2018, I was proud to have unanimous support from all of the chambers of commerce representing District 18, including the Arizona Chamber, Greater Phoenix Chamber, and of course my favorite chamber, the Chandler Chamber. Of course, Terry. Is Terry here? You didn't hear me say that, okay. So, legislative update. There's a lot going on, obviously. This session definitely feels busier than my previous 3 sessions, and I think everyone who I've talked to at the Capitol agrees with that assessment. There are about 1,700 bills introduced. This week that just ended was called Crossover Week, which is the week where committee hearings have ended for bills in the Chamber of Origin. So we've done hearings, Senate bills in Senate committees and House bills and House committees. So this week we didn't have any committee hearings except for appropriations, and we just had a lot of floor action where we voted on bills out of the chamber and kind of sent them over to the other chamber. So they crossed over to the other side of the courtyard. That's why they call it Crossover Week. So a lot going on. Big issues that are going on. The state budget is obviously the biggest thing that we do. We have about a $12.5 billion budget that we have to pass by June 30th. As you might have heard, we have a surplus this year. We have another surplus of about $800 or $900 million. So we're having a lot of conversations about what to do with that surplus. Obviously, our #1 priority has been and will always be additional investment in education, particularly our K-12 schools. We've made some progress on that in the last couple of years, but we still have a long way to go. We're still below 2008 funding levels, for example. We still have hundreds of classrooms without a permanent certified teacher. We have the worst student-to-counselor ratio in the country. I could go on. So we have a lot of needs in our K-12 system. Higher education is really important for me as well. Arizona has cut more from higher education than any state in the country since 2008. Tuition has also increased more in Arizona than any state in the country. People always get mad at me when I bring up this statistic. When I graduated from ASU in 2008, my in-state tuition was $4,000 a year. It's now $12,000 a year, 11 years later. Getting a lot of nods in the audience. So we need to do a lot more to support our higher education system, our community colleges. We don't fund our community colleges in Maricopa County at the state level at all, which is a problem. We also have a lot of infrastructure needs. Thankfully, one of the things that we're talking about at the legislature this year is we're funding a lot of infrastructure. We have a lot of one-time surplus dollars. So instead of using those dollars on permanent expenditures or permanently doing tax cuts, we're looking at investing in infrastructure projects throughout the state. One of those projects is right here in Chandler, and it's something that the 3 of us have been working on. It's a $4 million appropriation for a project on the 101 that's really desperately needed. So we're working to make sure that that's in the budget. So those are the broader things that we're talking about in terms of the budget. There was some talk that the budget was going to be done early. Some inside information that's not going to happen. There's still a lot of debate and discussion about what to use those surplus dollars on. So I think the budget's going to take longer than people think. It's not going to happen next week or probably for the next couple of weeks. So we might have another long session ahead of us. Last thing I'll mention, I have a couple bills that I'm working on that are moving through the process. I have 2 bills that have passed out of the Senate unanimously, and I have 2 more that are about ready to go before the full Senate. 3 of those bills have to do with mental health support in our schools. That's something I've been very focused on. I got a bill signed into law last year around training for suicide prevention that's now required for all school personnel in middle schools and high schools in the state. I'm continuing that work this session. The 2 bills that I passed out of the Senate, one has to do with mental health days in K-12 schools and basically clarifying for excused absences that mental health days count as excused absences. And then I have another bill that passed that expands that suicide prevention training requirement for anyone studying to be a school counselor or school social worker. They have to take that training when they're at ASU or their teacher training program. The third one that I have that I'm really excited about deals with student ID cards at the high school and college level. They would now have to have suicide prevention numbers on the back of those ID cards. So that is out of committee and should pass the full Senate hopefully next week. Fourth bill I'm working on has to do with community college. I've run legislation every year on expanding resources for community college students. So the bill that I have is Senate Bill 1284, which would create a pilot program for a promise program that would pay for 2 years of community college for lower income students who want to go into CTE programs, which is career and technical education. There's a lot of work that we can do to expand our educated workforce. A lot of kids who maybe don't want to go to college, but want to get some kind of post-high school degree or certification. And especially for the jobs here in Chandler, I think that's something that's really critically important. So we're running that bill through the process. A couple Chandler things that I wanted to mention real quick. Where did I put my piece of paper? There it is. So I mentioned the $4 million infrastructure project. Another issue that I know the city of Chandler loves talking about is short-term rentals. Does anybody have Airbnbs, short-term rentals in their neighborhoods that are operating? This is something we're trying to tackle at the state level. It's more of an issue in Tempe and Scottsdale than it is in Chandler, but we're trying to figure out where that line is. We're trying to regulate short-term rentals and go after really the bad actors, the party houses, and people who are renting out to multiple people for one house. So we're having conversations with the cities, with the business community about how we can oversee that at the state level. So that's an ongoing conversation. The bill that we're working on that I co-sponsored, I think the city of Chandler is in support, the League of Cities and Towns is in support, so that's another issue that we're working on. And then the last 2 things from an economic development perspective, we have a couple of tax credit bills that are going through the legislature that are going to be helpful to Intel and a lot of the employers here in Chandler. One is a R&D tax credit, research and development. It's an extension of an existing credit that Intel has used, that Honeywell, Raytheon, a lot of our great employers here in the state. All 3 of us are working on this. That bill is moving through the legislature. And then we also have the angel investment tax credit bill, which I know a lot of employers here in Chandler have used over the years. So that's another tax credit that we're going to be extending. It's not a new credit, it's just an extension of an existing one. And we're working to get that through the legislature as well. So I know I'm going to have my 2 colleagues come up separately, and I think we're going to take questions at the end. So appreciate you all being here and look forward to hearing your questions. Thank you.
Maya, please. Thank you.
Okay. After graduating from Arizona State University with a master's degree in public administration, Jennifer Germain found her calling in policy in the public sector. By being the co-founder of Stronger Together Arizona and We the People Summit, Jennifer has been able to push and educate others on the importance of public policy. After being elected into office, she has focused on education and healthcare. Please put your hands together for Representative Jennifer Germain.
Thank you, Anaya, and thank you, Mike. And good morning, everybody. So, I'm Jennifer Germain.
Good morning.
Good morning. Happy Friday. I'm actually the LDA team representative that physically lives in Chandler. My husband and I have lived in Chandler for 10 years. We actually live a block from Rick Human.
Oh, sorry about that.
So in addition to everything that Senator Bowie is working on, I've been working really, really closely with Representative Blackman, who was here, I believe, last month on earned release credits and criminal justice reform. So we did pass that out of the House last night. It is on its way to the Senate. This is the first substantial criminal justice reform package that the Arizona legislature has passed in decades. It will affect approximately 16,000 people in our prison systems. So it's a very substantial criminal justice reform package that is on its way to the Senate, and let's hope it makes it over the finish line, and we're going to do everything that we can in a bipartisan fashion to make sure that it makes it all the way. Working with Representative Weniger, Senator Bowie, Senator Kate Brophy-McGee, and Representative Epstein on Jake's Law, which is a big mental health omnibus for our kids. It'll create parity, and I'll let Representative Epstein talk more about that because it's her wheelhouse. But I'm going to have an amendment to that law that extends it for our special education population that is in our public schools until age 23. So I actually got a great catch, good job from Governor Ducey yesterday when I walked in and handed him the language that was missing from the bill. So really trying to make sure we're reaching across the aisle, working together to create good public policy. Because that's, when you have public policy where you've got really good agreement and everybody's working together, it creates a good network and a good system for our society. So really proud and honored to be part of a really great bipartisan team that's working for our kids here in the East Valley and all throughout Arizona. And I will turn it over to the next speaker. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. Ruby, will you please introduce the next person? We'll make you guys run quick. We're going fast here, too fast. We're all gonna be out of here by then.
Our next guest speaker, Representative Mitzi Epstein, has a bachelor's in computer science, and she has proven that she is a woman that can wear many hats. After working for numerous businesses, Mitzi decided to open her own small business, Custom Language Training, which was designed to help businesses and individuals become fluent in different languages to achieve their career goals. Given her background in analytics and business, Mitzi has been able to offer an innovative approach to the House of Representatives. Please give a round of applause to Mitzi.
Good morning. I echo my colleagues in a lot of the work that we're doing, and also in that we're kind of wiped out, especially Jennifer and I in the house. I pulled in, it was 10 o'clock when I pulled in my garage last night, so not my brightest morning, I gotta be honest with you. Nonetheless, this is a great job when we get a lot of good things done. I want to point out we have that Kathy Kalush is in the audience, and she's been working hard on a bill about barbers and cosmetology that we've been following, and I'm pretty sure that was one of them that we passed last night.
It was.
It was.
Unanimously.
Yeah, unanimously. You talk about great barbers. And Kathy deserves that round of applause for seeing a need for how she could make the industry work better for students, consumers, owners, everybody. So, great job.
Thank you.
Yes. And we've been working on a few other things, as Sean mentioned, a few of the packages we've done. LIHTC is one of them that I'm really hopeful this time makes it. That's low-income housing tax credit, where we are hopeful to build 1,000 new units. The predictions are that we need about 3,000 new units of affordable housing in Arizona, and this would be about 1,000 of them, in a program that is this great combination of economic development and providing affordable housing for people. My piece onto it was to make sure that the reporting included not just the economic development, but also the number of units and the wages of the people living in those units to make sure we're targeting the group that we want to do. That is a lot of what I do in the Ways and Means Committee, and that's just, let's make sure that we monitor and measure. I frequently, that'll be my comment about a lot of different bills, because I have a background in business. I've worked at Citicorp, I've worked in manufacturing, in their computer systems departments, and, you know, I write the reports, I've written the metrics. So I know that that's how we decide, is this public policy program working or not? So another, again, kind of a blur, but Jake's Law, thank you, Representative Germain. I think her amendment is a great example of how when we come up with a program, our teamwork just makes it so much better. Her understanding of knowing about this particular community, making sure they're well served, makes all the difference in the world for them. So Jake's Law began, I think, because of Jake's parents, absolutely. So Denise and Ben Schott Denslow have been just wonderful champions for people with mental health, who need mental health care. And it began when their child died by suicide. But along their journey in trying to find a solution so that does not happen again, we had a room full of people that were from education and mental health experts together, and they told their story. And Bonnie Didal from the Council of Human Service Providers, who I'd invited to this meeting, said to them, that might be a parity violation, what happened to their son. That began our journey of, let's pull that thread and see what we can figure out. So for a year, we met every other week with many different experts from healthcare and human service providers, lots of parents who were very concerned about this issue, and the insurance companies came in towards the end, because with my background, I wanted to start out by defining the problem. What is the problem? What is it really? So we reached out to lots of people, and 125 people shared their stories with us, so we could turn those anecdotes into data. And we worked on defining the problem, then define the solutions, figure out which one will actually work, and insurance parity will be definitely one of them. So this is going to be reporting where the insurance companies have to show to the Department of Insurance that they are meeting this law, which is essentially, if you provide mental health care in your insurance policy at one level, then you have to provide the same care for physical health. So the bottom line is, if you go in and you're in the hospital until you feel better for physical health problems, you should go in the hospital until you feel better for mental health problems. Whereas right now, patients are sent home because, I'm sorry, your insurance card says 4 days in the mental health unit, now you go home, and that's not working. So we hope this will make a big difference and save lives. I am delighted that Senator Kate Brophy-McGee took on, and while we had been working on this mental health parity in insurance, she had been working on schools and student delivering behavioral health in schools in a better way. They're all combined in one big omnibus bill that is being worked on in such a wonderful bipartisan manner. It's a great thing to see happening. So Jake's Law, we hope, will save lives and help kids in many ways. One more bright spot that's kind of a simple thing we did passed last night is we did quite a few things for workforce development. In particular, we passed that community colleges could provide bachelor's degrees. So we'll see how that goes. The bill is kind of funny. It says without raising property taxes, so we're going to see how that gets done, but a great bill. And we're also going to pay for, at our CTEDs, that's the career and technical education, 9th graders and 13th graders to also get their licenses and certificates, whatever they may need. It's especially important for that 13th grade, if you will. There are kids who start in their junior year of high school to work on a certificate, and they don't finish it in just the 2 years because it's a fairly complex certificate. So the state is going to go ahead and pay for them to finish that certificate so they are workforce ready. So we've done a lot of things in the last day, and I'm looking forward to your questions.
Thank you, Nancy. Appreciate it. All right, we've got some time for some questions here, so why don't we start? Matt?
Thank you very much, Senator
Mike, Matt.
and Legislator. You guys can't hear me? We want to get you on tape.
All right, better yet. Thank you very much for all your work you're doing down there. Mitzi, I'm really interested in affordable housing. As you know, Chandler, we only have about 12% of our land left. We've got to be really careful what we put there. Affordable housing, our police, firefighters, some of them can't afford to live here in Chandler. So can you give me more details on what we're trying to do down there? One, and number two, how can the cities help support and drive that as a solution, a long-term solution?
Thank you, Matt. I do know how important affordable housing is, and I believe it really is a city issue. And as in most cases, my walls are covered with Champion of the Cities awards because I believe in local control. I believe that city councils, what Chandler will figure out as a solution for yourselves is going to be different and better for Chandler than Tempe or any other place, or the state to tell you how to do it. So we have the LIHTC coming on, and that's more workforce housing. We need some more ideas. I'll give you an idea of something that I think will not work, but it's being offered, and something that could work, but it's being stopped. So there's an idea out there right now that if we just remove all of the city regulations on housing, then builders could build it more cheaply. Well, I believe in letting city councils figure out if we need multi-housing in an area, let's zone it so there's a wonderful multi-housing here and a park next door. Or zone it so that everything works together with the rest of the city, so it's walkable, so that it is convenient to transportation and so on. And I think city councils are in a good position to do that. But this bill would remove the ability of city councils to make those zoning decisions. So I'm never a fan of taking away the ability of cities to make their own decisions. I think one thing we should do is allow cities to decide if they want to do required affordable housing. So in other cities, in other states, a city council can say, well, developer, if you're coming in with a multi-housing development, this percentage should be affordable housing, and the city council would define what that means. If a city chooses to do that, it can be a very effective way to provide lots of different kinds of housing, especially seniors. Seniors need housing so very much right now. But the state has taken away that ability. So there are some good ideas out there, and there's some bad ideas, and we need to keep talking to find the right ones.
Yeah, I'll add a little bit to that too. There are some great models that exist right here in Arizona with Foundation for Senior Living and with Native American Connections on how they build these private-public partnerships and blend both the LIHTC credits on the state that are coming up in the state level and the federal level through the federal HUD grants and financing options, and then also through private financing and being able to sell some of their tax credits to investors to be able to build these larger affordable income housing units. So there are some great models that exist. We would like to see them expand out and become more robust in our community so that we can have housing for everybody who needs it.
Thank you.
Okay. Oh, we got a couple. Okay.
As you all know, Representative Campbell is working again on a infrastructure bill to maintain our statewide system. And the one-time money we're putting into capital projects makes nice headlines, but it just creates more infrastructure that we need to maintain. I'm encouraged that President Fan and Speaker Bowers both are supporting what Representative Campbell's trying to do this year, and I'd just like to hear your comments on that.
So I'll have to defer to my House colleagues for more of a detailed update. I know it's a House bill, so I haven't seen it yet. I don't know if the governor would sign it. As you all know, the governor has been very vocal about never signing anything that raises taxes ever on anything ever. So
I say this is not a tax.
is it a fee or something? Yeah. The gas tax, yeah. So I think I have some concerns, a little bit that I've heard about it, I have some concerns about how much it would be going up so quickly. So again, I don't want to comment on the bill because I haven't seen it over in the Senate yet, but there obviously is a need for additional investment in infrastructure. That's why we're making more of a priority in this year's budget, but you are correct that the more we build, the more we have to maintain. And this needs to be a collaborative, bipartisan conversation with the governor to figure out, okay, this is obviously something we need to focus on. We're the fastest growing county in the country. We're adding 200 people a day. So how are we going to maintain this infrastructure? So that needs to be part of a broader bipartisan conversation about how we fund the things that we need to fund to keep growing, keep thriving as a state. So I'll leave it to my two House colleagues to comment further.
And I'll just follow up with a little bit of a comment that, you know, there's not a more pure way to make people pay for what they're using than what we're calling a fuel tax, which is really a user fee.
Thank you. I'm going to echo Senator Bowie's concerns about it going too fast, too quickly up to that. Yes, we probably do need to index it to inflation so that we're at least maintaining what we have, and remind everybody that the 202 in West Chandler is going to be closed this weekend for resurfacing.
Leave it the way it is.
Jennifer took those complaints we received from constituents very much to heart, and she was on it, man. So, the gas tax, the piece of the bill that I have concerns with is that it is also trying to figure out what do we do about electric vehicles, hybrids, purely electric, and so on. They're using the roads and they're heavy, but how do we get them to pay their fair share too? So, the bill right now says let's let the DOA figure out if it should be a kilowatt hours usage tax or if it should be just a flat rate for every vehicle. And yet in transportation they talked about how it's the weight of the vehicle that matters. So what I'm trying to get to is, can we tie that, if we're going to charge electric vehicles sort of a flat fee, you own this car, therefore you have to pay this much for the roads. I would like to see two things happen. One, it probably should be related to weight. Kilowatt capacity might not really be telling. And the second thing is, if you are, you know, you have your little Volt and you drive 1,000 miles in a whole year, you probably shouldn't have to pay such a high fee, and perhaps you should be able to come to the MVD with an odometer listing and get a waiver on your fee or something like that. So I do look upon it as a user fee. It's one of those things that where the more you use the highways, the more you pay for them. It seems pretty good. So we don't want to overcharge anybody.
Kurt?
Thank you. I hate to rain on your parade, but the stock market is down another 900 points today, nearly 20% in the last few days, when we call that a stock market crash. Okay. So the point I want to make is that there's a fear of a very serious global recession. Arizona being a growth state would certainly be affected by that greatly. Okay. So the point is that I know we have all this money in the rainy day fund, and we're trying to find uses for that, tax cuts, spending, whatever. It may be prudent to put this stuff off for a little while and rethink that. I know it's tough because you guys have been working on the budget for months now, but things have really changed in the last few days. It's a different environment. And we know we went through in 2009 and 2010 after the 2008 crash. It was brutal, in particularly for schools. And we're still trying to recover from that stuff. So I would suggest that with this rainy day fund that we recognize there is a serious forecast for rain in the future, and maybe we need to go back in and put the stuff off until we kind of figure a more stable environment and do those things then. Can we get some comments?
So, Kurt, thank you. We are watching the economic indicators very closely. It's one of the reasons that the three of us advocated for putting money into the rainy day fund, because we're not always going to be in prosperous times. I know that the criminal justice reforms that I'm working on with Mr. Blackman, if those make it all the way through, it'll result in significant savings for the state. We're looking at cutting the prison population by 1/3. That's a significant savings. That's $1 billion line item. So we are looking at ways where we can trim costs for programs. We're looking at ways that we can streamline things. But some of our infrastructure does need to be repaired, and it's far cheaper to do regular maintenance than it is to do emergency repairs.
Yeah, and Kurt, we talked about this a little while ago. I would argue we should be focusing on the rainy day fund. We should be focusing on saving it in case there is a downturn. And those of you who remember 2008, 2009, we are very reliant on our state income tax and our state sales tax. 85% of the revenue in that $12 billion budget is either the state income tax or the state sales tax. And when there's a downturn, you know, you're not buying as many things, so the sales tax revenue goes down and people lose their jobs or they're not making as much money, so the income tax goes down. So 10 years ago, we had a $10 billion budget and a $3 billion deficit. And unlike what they do in Washington, we actually have to balance our budget every year and can't just add it on to debt. So when that downturn does come, having that rainy day fund is really important. And if we are going to make investments, make sure they're one-time investments and they're not ongoing and not continuing to decrease the revenue that we have coming into the state, because that means there's less revenue available and then we have to cut more from K-12 and higher ed and infrastructure and our prisons and all the other things that we have to fund as a state. So you're right. I think the news of this week, and I'm going to try not to check my retirement accounts today, feel depressed. Hopefully that will initiate a change in the conversation about, okay, let's be a little more careful, a little more strategic about how we're going to use this surplus and save more of it and reduce the number of ongoing expenditures, particularly tax cuts, that is going to make it harder for us to balance the budget in future years if there is going to be some kind of downturn or some kind of recession.
Certainly, it is at least a downturn. I heard a correction, and by your term,
Of course, crash.
a crash. Okay, that's valid, I think. It's not a surprise. We knew it had to be happening. The stock market cannot keep going like that without having a correction or a crash. So we should be planning for it, and that's why when we do tax planning, income and revenue planning, we shouldn't do things that are automatic, because then we can't allow for emergencies. Whether the emergencies are in the case of a revenue crash or the case of a pandemic, which in this case, we have both. So one of the opportunities that is being put forward is a tax cut that is, I call it the hatchet plan, because it would be an automatic reduction in income tax rates if our revenue from one year to the next is higher than the previous year. And Colorado did this, they called it Tabor, and various chambers of commerce said, this has been awful. We cannot plan for problems, and we cannot have nice things. We can't have roads if we don't have the income for them, and we can't improve our lives if we are constantly doing these cuts. And the thing is, if you leave it, just like local control, if you leave it to let the legislature figure it out from one year to the next, we can occasionally do a tax cut. Personally, I would love to see a sales tax rate cut. But we can't do that if we have these automatic cuts that is in one of the bills that we talked about last night. So when it comes to planning, I know we don't love the legislature, but it's better than when we let something happen in any kind of an automatic trigger. Those are not the way to handle a big problem like a recession. So yes, we have to watch spending and we have to watch revenue right now.
Thank you.
Yeah, we made this mistake before, let's
Yeah.
not make it again, okay?
Take it. I moved here from California, so I've seen this scenario before where property values go up and up and up, and then sooner or later you can't afford anything. I've got a son living in California now, spending $1,900 a month for a two-bedroom apartment. So my question is that I hear and I see in the paper all the time affordable housing, but I don't see a definition. Affordable housing for somebody making $10 an hour is different than somebody making 20 or 30. And as things go up, what are we talking about as far as affordability? And so what are the target groups? And I never hear any discussion about that.
As a general rule, affordable is considered 30%. You should pay no more than 30% of your income in your rent or housing costs in order to remain prosperous and able to pay your bills. So 30% is maybe a definition you're looking for. And the target groups, I know that for me, senior living is very, very important. And we have to make sure that I have so many of my senior constituents who have come to me and said, I suddenly can't afford my apartment that I've been in. And we have to do something about that. We have, as you mentioned, young people who are trying to find somewhere to live and the rent is just too high. So we need some solutions to this, and they're not obvious, but we can't just stick our heads in the sand and do nothing, so.
Any other questions?
Yeah, one.
Right there, please.
Thank you. I'd like to go back to Jack's issue on, which I was not familiar with, the infrastructure and is it a fuel tax or whatever they're referring to, and wonder what the data says. I know there's a lot of electric vehicles, but are the tax revenues for the state, gasoline sales, are those decreasing? What's actually going on there, number one? And number two, you know, you talked about the fairness of it, but you also have the fairness of the junk that, you know, gasoline engines are spewing into the air, and that cost in terms of health and other issues, you know, no burn days and all this other stuff. Thank you.
Who wants to-
So I know from talking with Mr. Campbell, Arizona has not raised the gas tax since 1989. So our economy has changed dramatically since the 1980s. We're still paying the same gas tax that we paid in
With
1989.
the dollars, I'm saying.
The dollars are,
Dollars.
yeah, time value of money. Our dollars are worth less today than they were in
Revenue generated
1989.
today is 27% of what it was in 1989.
Yeah. So Mr. Campbell's bill would jump it up to be what it would have been if we had indexed it to inflation starting in 1989. And that puts us right about 35 cents a gallon. Is that correct, Mr.?
36.
36 cents a gallon. Which is still significantly less than our surrounding states. I think California is closer to 60 cents a gallon for their gas tax. But I personally have concerns about it going up so quickly, so fast, especially as we're starting to head into an economic downturn.
For some context, I was born in the 1980s, so that's how long it's been. I think if I remember correctly, I think our state gas tax were 43rd out of 50 states, so we have one of the lower gas tax rates in the country. And then obviously you have more electric vehicles being used and folks that are exempt from that tax. So that's why the revenue has been kind of declining over time. But I do have concerns. I think the House bill would, what, double it? Is that right? Double the current, yes. Which I think is probably too high. So over a 3-year period, yeah. So if the bill comes out of the House, I'm happy to take a look at it, but it's got to be part of a broader conversation about transportation funding. Some transportation funding is at the county level, some is at the city level and the state level, so it really needs to be a part of a broader conversation. And we have a lot of these relatively newer freeways. When you compare us to like Michigan, people say, well, our roads are great compared to Michigan, and I would say, well, yeah, our roads are like 20 years old, so just give it 20 or 30 years and they're gonna need a lot of repairs and a lot of investment. So working with the county, working with the cities and the state, it's gotta be part of a broader conversation about our infrastructure investment, where those dollars are gonna come from and how we fund it.
And I completely agree with that, except that if we do something specific to Maricopa County, we will kill the opportunity to have a statewide plan, and our economy depends on our whole state infrastructure.
Any more questions?
So, yeah, real quick, can we,
Yeah, Matt.
thank you, real quick question here. What does that
Would you
mean
use
to
the
the,
mic because
Yeah.
we're recording?
what does that mean to the average consumer?
What does that mean to the average consumer a year? 36 cents a gallon. I don't have to do the math real quick.
Depends on how much you drive.
Let me,
Yeah, I know, but roughly, I know, 10,000.
You go to Jack?
yeah, 10 cents a gallon increase for the average consumer is $5 a month.
Okay.
10 cents a gallon is $5 a month.
So $5 a month for the average consumer, but we're also concerned about what it does to small businesses. People who have florist shops, people who have food delivery businesses who rely on being able to transport goods around the valley, around the state, and operate their small businesses, and making sure that we are giving them time to build up their revenues and their budget models to make sure that they can handle this.
Anyone else?